Okay, so next intracellular accumulation is your hyaline change. Okay, so remember that the term hyaline usually refers to an alteration within cells or in extracellular space that gives a homogeneous, glassy pink appearance in routine histologic sections stained with hematoxin and eosin. Okay, so hyaline change can be of two types. No, we have the intracellular and the extracellular hyaline. For your intracellular hyaline, this is seen in reabsorption droplets, in Russell bodies, and in alcoholic hyaline. And for your extracellular hyaline, usually ito yung mga chronic condition na, no? Such as in your collagenous fibers, in old scars, they may appear as hyalinized. Okay, although yung biochemical basis natin dito hindi talaga clear, pero based on the H&E findings, no, they appear as homogeneous glassy pink appearance. So they most likely parang hyaline sila. Although extracellular hyaline can also be present in a long-standing condition such as your hypertension and diabetes. They may appear in the walls of the arteries or the arterioles rather, especially in the kidney. Okay, so later malalaman natin yan as we go on with our lecture, no, on the kidneys. All right, they become hyalinized, resulting from extravasated plasma protein and deposition of basement membrane material. All right, now for glycogen naman, again, excessive intracellular deposits of glycogen are seen in patients with an abnormality in either glucose or glycogen metabolism, as seen in your diabetes and your glycogen storage diseases. And remember that glycogen, they appear as clear vacuoles within the cytoplasm because it is usually dissolved in aqueous fixatives. Thus, it is readily identified when the tissues are fixed in absolute alcohol. And aside from that, it should be stained, okay, best with your best carmine or your PAS reaction or PAS stain or periodic acid shift stain, which imparts a rose to violet color to the glycogen. Although they can, pwede din sila mag-stain sa ibang protein-bound carbohydrates. All right, next is your pigments, okay? So pigments are colored substances, some of which are normal constituents of the cells, which are, example is your melanin, whereas other substances are abnormal and they accumulate in the cells under special circumstances. And your pigments can be of two types. We have exogenous and endogenous pigments. So the most common exogenous pigment is your carbon or your coal dust because it is a ubiquitous air pollutant in urban areas. All right, so next is your pwede din siyang makita, yun yung as I have said, seen in anthracosis, yung mga intrapulmonary, mga peribronchial lymph nodes natin, yung makikita natin yun, anthracotic pigments. They can be seen also in coal workers pneumoconiosis and in tattooing. So tattooing is a form of localized exogenous pigmentation of the skin, no? So anong nangyayari sa pagtattoo, no? The pigments inoculated are phagocytosed by your dermal phagocytes or dermal macrophages, in which they reside for the remainder of the life of the person. All right, of the tao. Hello mga tao, para si Syrian ano lang sino ba 'yon? Basta yung vlogger. Okay? They remain for the remainder of the life of the mga tao no kung sino nagpatato. Bakit hindi natatanggal yung tattoo? Remember that these pigments, no, exogenous pigment are innate siya. So hindi siya nag-evoke ng inflammatory response. So walang ano yung katawan natin na mechanism na maano siya kasi wala man siyang ginagawa or nandun lang siya, it will stay forever na hindi siya harmful to the katawan ng mga tao. Okay? So nandiyan lang siya. Although it can also be removed now by laser, di ba? Yung tattoo natin. All right, next is your endogenous pigments. So they can occur, pwede siyang maging or in the form of your lipofuscin. So lipofuscin is an insoluble pigment, also known as your lipochrome or wear and tear pigment. Okay, so secondary usually to old age or aging, no? So wear and tear nga, di ba? Or although they can also occur in your patients with severe malnutrition and cancer cachexia. All right, so this is your lipofuscin. Next is your melanin. Remember that melanin is the only endogenous brown-black pigment. Okay, So ito yon, it is an endogenous brown-black pigment formed when the enzyme tyrosinase will catalyze the oxidation of your tyrosine to dihydroxyphenylalanine in melanocytes. All right. Next is your homogenesic acid in cases of your alkaptonuria. Okay, a rare metabolic disease, 'di ba? Very very common ito sa CM natin, 'di ba? Sa clinical microscopy. And it can also be deposited in skin connective tissue as your ochronosis. Okay, remember homogenesic acid. All right. Lastly is your hemosiderin. So, syempre hemosiderin, as you all know, these are this is a hemoglobin derived substance or golden yellow to brown granular pigment. Okay? And remember the difference between hemosiderosis and hemochromatosis. Pag sinabi ng hemosiderosis, there is systemic overload. Ang ibig sabihin, hindi na siya nakikerry or nasi-store properly, and therefore it will deposit in organs. That is hemosiderosis. Now, when the deposition in organs will cause damage to the organs, it is termed as your hemochromatosis. So remember the difference between the two. Next, we go on to your pathologic calcification. So pathologic calcification is the abnormal tissue deposition of calcium salts together with your iron, magnesium, and mineral salts in smaller amounts. Now, there are two types of calcification. No? We have the dystrophic calcification and your metastatic calcification. Okay? So, ang dystrophic calcification, when deposition occurs locally in dying tissue, so ibig sabihin, it is present in cell injury and in areas of necrosis. So, it is known as your dystrophic calcification. Alright? So, remember that normal yung serum calcium nito. Walang hyperparathyroidism. Walang hypercalcemia. Okay? Just present in your areas of necrosis. Alright? Okay. So, next is your metastatic calcification. Okay? By the way, yung yung dystrophic calcification, example niyan, are your heterotopic bone, okay, yung mga intracellular, extracellular in both location na pwede siya maging present or present siya in your heterotopic bone. Ibig sabihin ba in areas na hindi kung saan hindi dapat siya, nandun siya. All right? So in case of heterotopic bone, there's an example of your dystrophic calcification. Another example is your samoma bodies, which are your lamellated configurations, no, in cases of certain cancers, no, for example yung mga papillary thyroid carcinoma, pwede meningioma, yun, pwede siya magkaroon ng samoma bodies. These are actually under an example of your dystrophic calcification, and also your asbestos bodies. All right, so form of dystrophic calcification, normally yung serum calcium but present siya in cases of in dying tissues, in cell injury, and in necrosis. Next is your metastatic calcification. Again, itong pinagkaiba nila is that they may occur in normal tissues whenever there is hypercalcemia. Itong metastatic calcification naman, yan, pinagkaiba niya is can occur in normal tissues whenever there is hypercalcemia. All right? Okay, next, we go to cellular aging. So, Diyos ko, cellular aging, kahit anong pahid-pahid mo dyan sa mukha mo or ni magpabelo ka dyan, wala tayong magagawa dyan. Kasi nga, tatanda at lilipas. Tatanda at lilipas rin ako. Okay? Ganun talaga yung life, no? Meron talagang end. 'Di ba dati may mga tawag dito, meron daw mga tawag dito, meron daw ano 'yun? Fountain of Youth, 'di ba? Yung dati pa yung mga Egyptian, may Fountain of Youth. Diyos ko, ngayon nasaan na sila, 'di ba? Nasaan nakamami na sila, mummified na sila. All right? So wala talagang So it's an inevitable process talaga yung cellular aging natin. All right? So nag-age tayo kasi yung cells natin nag-age din. Okay? So what is cellular aging? Cellular aging is the result of a progressive decline in cellular function and viability caused by genetic abnormalities and accumulation of cellular and molecular damage due to the effects and exposure to exogenous influences. Siyempre, habang nandito tayo sa world. So, we are exposed to different exogenous influences natin. So, be it environmentally induced, okay? Okay, pwedeng mechanistic alterations, aging talaga, all right? So, pwede yon. So, there are two mechanisms na sinasabi nila, no? There are two ways, no? We have the DNA damage. Okay, so ito yung ano natin, no? A variety of exogenous factors or exogenous agents, be it physical, chemical, or biologic agents, and endogenous factors such as the free radicals, no? Okay, that threaten the integrity of nuclear and mitochondrial DNA. All right, so damage to the DNA secondary to ROS, okay, reactive oxygen species of free radicals. So that's one, and the next is your cellular senescence. Okay, cellular senescence occurs when the normal cells have limited capacity for replication, and after a fixed number of divisions, cells become arrested in a terminally non-dividing state known as your replicative senescence. So ibig sabihin, at a certain point, mag-divide lang siya. Meron lang point kung up to kailan siya mag-divide. So this can be, the cellular senescence can actually be attributed to the following mechanisms. We have the telomere attrition. Ibig sabihin, there is shortening of the telomeres. Remember that telomeres are short repeated sequences of DNA. All right, and telomerase is specialized RNA complex that uses its own RNA as a template and adding nucleotides to the ends of the chromosomes. So, yung telomere length naman is maintained by nucleotide addition mediated by an enzyme called telomerase. Okay, so nag-a-add siya para hindi mag-shorten yung telomeres natin so that it can still replicate. However, as the cell ages, yung telomere natin or yung telomerase activity natin is decreased na. So, ibig sabihin hindi niya ma-add, hindi niya siya makapag-add para ma-maintain yung length ng telomere natin. So remember that, for example, ito yun, telomere length, okay, and this is the number of cell division. So remember that in somatic cells, no, ang telomere length natin is nagdi-decrease. Actually, pababa sila ng pababa, although yung germ cells, as is lang siya, pero eventually, as you go along with the graph, it will gradually decline din, no? Same as your stem cells. But in well-differentiated or in your differentiated cells, no, mag-ano talaga siya, mag-shorten talaga yung telomere natin until eventually hindi na siya makapag-replicate and the cell age and then the cell will eventually die. All right? So responsible yung telomere length natin sa ating aging. Kaya the longer the telomere or the active the telomerase activity is, still you will kumbaga young forever ka. So walang beauty products na makakapag-lengthen ng telomere length natin. All right? So it's an inevitable circumstance talaga that we will all age. All right? Pero pag nag-age tayo, dapat age gracefully. Kaya sila nagpaparetoke, okay? Nagpapa-beauty, all right? Next is your activation of your tumor suppressor genes. Okay? So na-activate yung mga tumor suppressor genes natin and your telomere attrition. These are the mechanisms that produce your cellular senescence. Okay? So aside from DNA damage, okay, and your cellular senescence, we also have defective protein homeostasis. Okay, as the cell age, no, meron tayong dapat na maintain yung protein homeostasis. So it's either na maintain yung pag-fold or correctly folding conformations of the protein, and also degradation of misfolded, damaged, or unneeded proteins by the autophagy lysosome system and ubiquitin proteasome system. Now, any defect in this mechanism will result to your abnormal, syempre na-accumulate yung mga degraded or misfolded protein. Okay, hindi tayo na maintain yung correctly folded conformation ng protein. and therefore it will contribute to your cellular aging. And lastly, your dysregulated nutrient sensing. So caloric restriction increases longevity. So kaya huwag kayong kumain ng kumain, lumamon ng lumamon. So ano yan, scientifically based yan. Caloric restriction increases longevity by reduced IGF-1 signaling and increased sirtuins. Okay, remember sirtuins, ha? So these are These are proteins thought to promote the expression of several genes whose products will increase longevity. All right? So sabi nila daw, yung red wine daw. Yung red wine daw constitute, may activate sirtuins. So pag madami kang sirtuins, mag-increase yung lifespan mo or may longevity ka. Aside sa bihon, di ba sabi long life? All right? It's sirtuins, okay? That will proven daw to prolong life, no? Okay? Aside from that, pag na-increase yung sirtuins mo, reduce din na IGF-1 signaling natin. Excuse me. All right, so this is our picture of or diagram on cellular aging. So remember now, pwede siyang extra multifactorial, so or outside the body, exogenous kumbaga. So carcinogenic exposure or sporadic errors, secondary to rapid oxygen species or free radicals. Free radicals, no, then will cause the DNA damage. Okay, defective DNA repair will cause subsequent mutations. No, with cellular senescence, there's telomere shortening again, no, will cause decreased replication and cell loss eventually. And for your defective homeostasis, either in increase in damaged proteins kasi yung misfolding ng protein or yung folding ng protein nagkakaroon ng misfolding, hindi napapackage well, or decrease in the normal proteins. Okay, so misfolded siya, hindi siya na-handle ng katawan, so hindi siya na-degrade, so kaya ganun. So decreased cell functions kasi proteins are constitute pa din ng mga intracellular components ng cells natin. Therefore, decrease yung cell functions natin, cellular aging. Okay, and with nutrient sensing, ito, decrease yung insulin IGF signaling, decrease ang TOR and altered yung sirtuins, altered transcription, increase DNA repair, increase protein synthesis, will activate your or counteract your aging. So itong mga to, insulin signaling and increase in sirtuins will counteract your aging, will prolong your life. Okay, will contribute to longevity. So I guess this is my last slide, no? And see you pala on Thursday. We will have a quiz on cell adaptations, no? So be prepared, and we will have our lecture on inflammation. Inflammation and repair. I will post the topics for the prelim exams natin para at least gusto ko kasi matapos natin and then pwede tayo may review sessions prior to your prelim exams. Okay? So mag-aral kayong mabuti. Thank you and good morning.